rather, we've got for you. Firstly, a presentation by Code for Australia. Then we have the we have some questions and answers, followed by a break, and then we hand across to our President, David Stonier-Gibson. Then we hand across to George Scarbeck for the What's New. We then look at iHelp Online, conducted tonight by Bert Alsich and the rest of the iHelp team. And then after 9 o'clock, if you wish to stay around for a little bit of informal help, then you're very welcome to stay on. However, right now, we have Code for Australia. And before we get into that, I'd just ask everybody to, unless you're actually speaking for Code for Australia, turn your or mute your microphone. If you're not sure where the microphone is, it's in the bottom left-hand corner normally. And if you press your Alt key, it will automatically pop up so that you can then take your cursor to it and click on it and mute the microphone. So let's hand across to Code for Australia. Firstly, we've got Esther Semo. She's the head of Community and Communications. She's previously worked at Gender Equity Victoria, running projects aimed at stopping violence against women online. She's also done some stints at various not-for-profits, unions, and in the music industry. And all that whilst running her own business. Broad Services is the name of that business, which promotes feminist events and services. And then following straight after Esther, we have Nish Gakkhar, and she's a partner with Smart Services Queensland, which is part, I assume, of Code for Australia. And she's a software developer who's graduated from Monash University in Australia and worked in IT with exposure to banking, music and environmental industries. With a background in computer science, she's an enthusiast of learning new technologies and engaging in meetups. So I'd like you all to noiselessly welcome Esther.
Hi everyone, it's fun to receive a silent applause. I'm just going to share my screen with you because I've got a brief presentation and then I'll throw it to Nish, who's also got a brief presentation, and then we can do some question and answers. So I'll just share my screen now. If there is any issues, if someone wants to yell out, I'm just about to share it. Great. So you should be able to see my presentation. And I'm going to take silence as a good cue because I can't see your faces at the moment. So yes, I wanted to firstly thank all of you for having us, Code for Australia, say a few words about what we do and what we're about, and especially to Kirsten, who is the person who reached out to us, but also to all of you for attending tonight. I know that there was some technical issues, so I'm glad we're all here. I just wanted to start off by acknowledging and paying my respects to the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, the traditional custodians of the land that Code for Australia primarily works on. As we're all located in different areas, if you'd like to pay respect to the elders of and traditional custodians of the land you work on, feel free to do that in the chat or also privately, obviously. So a little bit about Code for Australia. Essentially, we are a not-for-profit and we specialise in helping to create a more digital government. So we do this through a range of programs and it's based through the tenets and kind of the ideas of civic tech. So we're going to go through what civic tech means and the different programs that we offer to give you a good idea of what we're about and how it might align with some of your values as well. So yes, as I said, we're a not-for-profit organisation. We were founded in 2014, so really not that long ago. And we were founded off the back of Code for America starting. So Code for America started, I think in 2009 or 10. So we took our cue from them and we're essentially working towards a government that's made by and for everyone. We're part of a global network that's called Code for All. And I'll mention a little bit more about them later because we've got some really exciting things on the pipeline with them as well. And there are lots of ways to get involved in the work that we do. So what is civic tech? There's lots of different definitions flying around about what it is, but in our minds we've come up with it's technology that is created to improve social good, whether it's within the realms of government or not. So civic tech essentially is tech that is built to help people, and we tend to do it predominantly with government. So 99% of the programs that we run and that we offer are done through government, and the rest are done through not-for-profits. So some examples of civic tech would be online forms and services that you might need to utilise from the government or from your local council, peer-to-peer sharing and community organising. Some might say that your meetup is civic tech, depends on how you'd like to define it. Resident feedback and neighbourhood forums, data access and transparency is something we care a lot about, and the list can go on and on. So what are we all about? Well, Code for Australia's vision is that Australia will have a world-class digital government that's built by and for everyone. So for us, that means that when policies and services are created, they're driven by public needs and input. I'm sure we've all witnessed examples of, and not just in tech, but of different governments doing things that don't necessarily have their citizens in mind. So we're trying to avoid that. For us, it also means data, code, and platforms are open by default. So that means basically that you know exactly what's going on with the information that you're providing to your government, and that the public sector embraces openness and collaboration. Oftentimes, one thing that we are really striving for is to get collaboration from different government departments and teams so that they're not rebuilding the same tools over and over. You see this a lot with councils. It's something that we're working on currently in Victoria. So what do we want? A world where citizens, governments, and industry can work together seamlessly to create meaningful change. So we use technology as this lever for creating change, and we do work primarily with the public sector, as we said. So we're experts in government. We work with public servants day in and day out, but we're apolitical. So despite what we may think privately, we have to make sure that we can help anyone who needs it, regardless of their political parties or affiliations. So we want to see political change that improves our lives through technology. So what we like to say is this is us, which is that little boat, and that really, really big ship is essentially the government. So sometimes it can feel like we're really, really nearby, and sometimes it can feel like we're just dinging off the edge. We also like to say that this is us. So diversity is really fundamental in the work that we do. But it's not just fundamental in terms of the way that we work as an organisation, but it's fundamental because the problems that we face as citizens, all of us, can't be solved unless everyone's represented. So we want to make sure that everyone's represented in the process of designing and making and building tools and services that the government will end up using, or the government will end up letting us use rather. So people making and designing technology should be representative of the people that it's being made for, which is a pretty simple concept, but one that is sometimes a little bit evasive. So what are the problems that we're trying to solve? Some good examples are, I think a lot of people might have heard about My Health Record. So essentially it was a bungled $1 billion, that's B, billion dollar electronic health record system that essentially costs $200,000 per patient. So that's your taxpayers adding to that kind of ridiculous amount for something that didn't work very well. There was another bungled out IT system across the state's public education network. This was in New South Wales, which cost $531 million, which could have built 20 new schools. There's also an IT system that processes child support payments, and it's being updated for $104 million every year. And it was quoted as being a year late and in disarray. So this is something that we also see a lot, and it's something that we're trying to fix. Alongside there not being a lot of collaboration between government departments, there's also a lot of, there's not a lot of reuse of existing technology. So basically what that means is they'll build something or they'll hire someone to build something, and then it'll become out of date really quickly. And then there has to be a whole bunch of new money thrown at it to build it again, as opposed to just maintaining it. So some things we want to change are this is outsourcing with no knowledge transfer. So instead of a government department hiring an agency or someone that they've procured to build something, but they're not getting any of the knowledge transfer of how to maintain it or how to make sure that it's sustainable, we want to see them learning skills so that eventually one day we might not be needed anymore. We'd also like to see budgeting for projects instead of products. So instead of just throwing money at an idea, we'd like to see them throwing money and throwing capability at specific products. So products can mean a website, an app, a form, anything that they choose. And we also want to see services being designed and delivered without, we don't want to see, services being designed and delivered without ongoing user feedback and iteration. So we don't just want them to build something and then not hear from concerned citizens if there are any. So why is this hard inside government? It's very complex due to the scale and often legislation. Public money means public responsibility. And for government, the consequence of getting things wrong can be really, really scary for them. And a lot of the time, media attention and disinformation can be scary as well. But in saying all of that, we really do believe, and we actually know to be true, that public servants are some of the most dedicated, brilliant, and creative people.
Sometimes the easiest thing to do
They're
is if
just
it's not
working
working,
incredible
or you're not, or an element of it is not working, log out.
Thank you for whoever muted that. So how do we try and solve these problems? So essentially we have a number of programs, and they start from one-day programs, which are really simple workshops that we run called Tech for Non-Tech. And they go all the way through to our fellowship program, which is sort of our flagship. Nish, who's going to be speaking right after me, is one of our current fellows. So our fellowship program, it's basically a 6-month deployment where we put in 3 technologists, so developers, UX specialists, data scientists, and we help a government department that they're put into solve a team. So essentially, we're teaching them how to build things, but we're also building things for them. So as I said, Nish will be speaking a little bit more to this later on, but we do run a suite of other programs as well. So here are some examples of fellowships that we've done recently, because that might give you a good indication of the type of work that we do. So this fellowship was undertaken with Legal Aid New South Wales, which is the same as Legal Aid Victoria. And basically what it is it's an online triage tool. So the problem that we were trying to solve was Legal Aid were getting a huge number of incoming calls to their hotline. So a lot of these calls weren't actually able to be prioritised. So you would get people with general inquiries being prioritised over people that had a court date that afternoon. So we were tasked with building an online tool that would help people figure out very, very quickly and very simply the information that they needed, download it as a PDF, but also it would put them in contact with services that might help them as well. So for example, counselling and things like that. Another example is one that we're actually just about to wrap up, which is in Victoria. As I'm sure most of you know, Victoria's bin system is changing. So we started working with Hobsons Bay City Council to build an app that would help people figure out when to take their bins out and what they could put in each bin. So this isn't supposed to replace, going to your council website or contacting your council, but it's just supposed to supplement it. So some of the tenets for us really are that we help, we don't sell, we're human-centered, and we default to open whenever we can. So there's a little bit more information. It's about capability building and solution building. We empower people to empower others, and we have permission to fail. So we try and be as iterative as possible so that we can have outcomes that build public trust and influence for the entire public service. So what human-centered means for us really is showing the government how to design with people, not at them. So everyone is welcome to be involved in the process, and it tends to mean that we do a lot of research before we actually start building anything, because you don't want to build something if you don't know who it's for or what their capabilities are and things like that. So here's a little diagram of what the human-centered design process looks like. So you can see on the very left, there's a problem question. You can see there's a problem or question to answer. Am I muted?
You're good to go.
No, you're
I'm
on
learning Zoom.
Great. No, that's okay. Sorry about it. It's confusing.
I might have to mute all if so if everyone could please mute yourself if you're not talking. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that. So you can see the human-centered design process. There's a lot to it, but at the very, very core of it, we want to do research to uncover what people actually need before we start solving the problem. So that's basically called discovery. And then once we actually get to the point where we're building something, we want to keep testing and we want to keep iterating so that we're making sure that people can access things easily, that the UX is good, so the user experience is good, and that we're creating prototypes that can be reused as well. We also do something called agile delivery, which is, for those of you that don't know, it might sound a little bit complicated, but it isn't. It's basically just the way that we work. We tend to work in 2-week bursts, and it just means that we're only putting on our plates as much as we can, and we're always reflecting on a regular basis as opposed to just at the end of a project. So as I said, we default to open, and we think that all government departments should, because public money should equal public data and public code. It's really important to us, and I think when we consider how much money can be wasted on these things, and when we realize that a lot of the times it's our money, it's taxpayer dollars, it makes us really want to help. So some other cool things about us, and then I'll throw it to Nish because I do feel like I've been talking for a while. We run a program called Civic Makers. So Civic Makers is a community-led event where we basically open our doors and ask anyone who wants to be involved in civic tech, who has a problem that they think needs solving, or that they think that they want to be involved in solving, to come and pitch us their ideas, and we will basically connect them with other people who are interested. It's really fun, and it's a fantastic way to meet people, and we meet every fortnight. We also do something called Open House, which is basically where we show the work that we've been up to. That happens about every 6 weeks. And now, because of COVID, obviously we're doing it online, as we are with most everything else. We also have an amazing community. So we communicate mostly via Slack, and there's a couple thousand people in our Slack channel. We also have a really great newsletter, and we communicate a lot with people on social media as well. And finally, as I said before, we're part of a global network, and there's over 30 members and growing, and we're a governing member. So that means we collaborate with a lot of people, predominantly in places like Canada, because they have a similar government system than us, sorry. But we also have collaborated with places like Japan and South Africa and Mexico to bring some of our programs over there. So it's really exciting work. So now it's time to hand over to Nish, and she's going to run you through the project that she's been working on, and also just some cool things that might be a little bit more technical than what I can share about civic tech. So I'll stop sharing now and pop myself on mute, and I'll hand it over to Nish.
Thank you so much, Esther. Now I'll be sharing my screen, and here you go. And I think it's visible now.
Before Nish starts, can I just butt in and mention to everyone, down the bottom of your screen is a chat box. If you have a question that you would like to ask either of the girls, you can just click on that and type your question in, and at the end of their talk, I'll ask them those questions. So rather than wait till the end, you can type your question in there as the girls talk.
Okay.
Thanks, Nish. Sorry.
Oh, good. Perfect. So now I'll be talking more about what is tech actually in civic tech. So it's not every time always about softwares and platforms every time. So it's more about developing a product in tech with some work practices and other software and platforms that goes hand in hand. So this presentation will be focusing more on the product, how you decide what product you're gonna create, and what will be the steps you go through, and what will be the process like. So moving on to the next part, I would just want to throw some light on my current fellowship, the project that I am doing. So we are a team of 3 working on the project with Queensland government. So here the issue is to simplify a 28-page PDF outcome into almost half of the length of it. So current guide is pretty extensive, but it is hard to find some relevant information from the document. So what actually the project is, when you find something on the back of your food or any drinks, those labels, so there will be some number of questions that you'll be answering. And based on that, there will be one label that will be generated. So right now they have like number of questions and that generates around 28-page document. So we will be simplifying that process, and that will come down to almost like 14 pages PDF and some small information that will be helpful in selling the food in Queensland. Moving on to the next part, so how we are trying to fix this problem. It is majorly divided into 3 parts, out of which the very first is to understand what is the problem statement. Yeah. So let's take an example that how we understand the problem. For example, you are deciding every restriction is over now, the restrictions are lifted, and you can call your friends over. So the very first thing is, what you want to have is cook the dinner, cook the feast for your friends. To make that happen, you first have to understand what recipe you have to cook, how many number of people you're going to call. And so for making that marvelous feast, you will require to know the dietary requirements of everyone, how many people will be calling, and if there is someone who is allergic to anything. So now the thing is, why you are asking your questions to yourself. It is because you want to make a meal which is amazingly awesome and you don't want to mess up anything. And exactly in the same way, when you are developing a software, you go through some processes, which is almost similar to this. You undertake the requirements, make yourself aware of it, and dive into ask questions like these. This is the way how you understand the problem in tech too. Except that you have to make decisions by keeping the technical constraints and restrictions in mind. So once you have acquainted yourself with the problem, understood what the problem is, you go on diving in solutions. How easy it could be, let's see. When you have a fair idea about the problem, the very important aspect of coming up with the solution is to dig deep into that. Ask more questions, ask 5W questions, why, when, how I'm going to do it, which means that why do we need to solve it? Who will be affected by the solution? What effect it will have at the end user, which is at this example and at this point is your friends, your family members whom you're going to call for the feast. Break down the problem to the finest possible level so that you can look at it holistically. You don't miss any point, any aspect out of it. For instance, if the problem is to cook the feast, then why is it required? Let's say lockdown is over, you want to have celebration. That is your answer. What will be the menu? What will be who fancy which cuisine? Something like these. So some of these are just examples. There can be many more questions that can come up while you go ahead, while you shop for the feast and everything. And always analyze your answers and back it up with some actions, which in terms of following practice and development methodology, we have some examples of iterative research and non-iterative models. As Esther already explained you about something about agile, which means that it's iterative. The word itself reflects that iterative means you can go back and make some changes to it. You do not need to do the whole recipe from the scratch again. And on the other hand, non-iterative means you cannot go back, like when you burnt a cake, you have to start from the scratch. So in tech these days, the hot and the most dominant one right now in the industry is agile methodology, which is pretty flexible. It welcomes changes and always prioritize your tasks. So unlike waterfall, which is an iterative model, agile has more customer engagement. It does not rely heavily on initial requirements. For example, the example will be like the salt is less in the food, so you want to add salt in it. There is no sauce, you want to add sauce in it. So something similar to that. So the best questions can be answered if you sympathize with the end user. The more closer look you'll have at it, the more better perspective you'll have. Having said that, there are a number of ways you can do this and empathize with the user, out of which I'm going to explain one, which is called user mapping. So what actually it is, that technique which reflects on the experience that the customer or end user will go through. Here, it will be the person who will be organizing the lunch. So this process will have more steps to follow, and then you create a basic minimal structure with which the user will be able to create product with. Here, the product is the feast. So let's look at the steps and understand that with an example. So this is a very basic structure where the first thing you have to define is the user state or statement, which will be our cooking the feast. Then create the user story. So user story tells the entry point, engagement points, and exit points of the product. Third step is to give possible feature to user stories. For example, you'll add up filters on top of your user stories. And lastly, you'll need to filter out the best possible features out of it to make that minimal structure. To make it much clearer, we'll be moving to the example for this. So right now, we have the example of preparing the feast. So the first thing will be to set the user state, prepare the feast. So this is our aim to accomplish. Next, we will drill down to user stories, questioning ourselves 5 W's and how it will be successful, who will be involved. So in order to organize the feast, you have to send invites, or you have to anyhow you have to communicate with people whom you want to invite so that they are notified. And you will also need menu to cook the feast, or if you have menus, you need ingredients, or you can go to YouTube, find how-to videos and everything. If in case you know the recipe, you go with the list of ingredients. So everything which will be required actually make the feast happen. And that very major points will be added to user stories. And then you move down to the possible features. So you have major things already sorted out in user story. And there can be different ways to send invites. For example, you can call them, you can message them, you can email them and everything. So when you go online or get it from some recipe book, or you get the recipe from YouTube or any website. So after going through all these 3 steps, the last and the foremost important thing is to filter out the basic one, without which the product is incomplete. If you cook feast for like 20 people, but you haven't invited them, so that's a failure. You called everyone, but you don't have food ready, that is a failure. You have recipe ready, but haven't cooked the cuisine yet, that is a failure. In exact way, you have to balance everything to make that feast successful. So in that skeleton structure, you'll pull out the most important possible features. For example, you get the contact details, so that next step could be you'll be able to contact them. Second thing will be, in order to make the feast, you should have some recipe or at least ingredients. And other thing is, if you have recipe, you have ingredients, you're gonna cook it, so you need cooking pots. So that comes with the walking skeleton. You can add dietary requirements next onto that. So in other words, if you have chicken as an ingredient, which is the minimal requirement, then after that, in the next iteration, you can make chicken curry out of it. You can make chicken nuggets or chicken parma, everything. So this covers up with the, so this covers up the example of user story mapping. Considering that we are going to make a feast. And so now we have a solution. We have understood the problem. We have a solution. And we will be looking next to have some action on it. So now when we have a solution, you know how you're going to cook it. So the very first thing is how you're going to go forward with it is you need cooking pots. You need something to contain it. So in very simple and quick way, the very thing that we are doing in technology is also, we have the problem, we have understood the solution, and the next thing that we are going to do is how we can implement that solution. So as I have discussed already what the problem is in the first few slides with Label Buster and the project that we are doing with Queensland government, we have decided on this technical stack, like how the front page will be looking like will be decided by HTML. That is a language with which we code. Then how the page styling will be like, whether it will be red, it will be green, it will be yellow, it will be blue, that will be decided by CSS, which will be used for styling. And what actions it will be acting with will be with JavaScript. For example, you have clicked the button. What will be the next step happening? That will be decided by JavaScript. So this is how we solve problem in tech, which is almost similar to how you cook a feast for everyone. And that's all from my end. Thank you.
Okay, now we have, we go across to Peter Bacon, who's going to sort out the questions and seek the answers. Over to you, Peter.
Thanks, David. We've only had one question from the audience or the members, so I'll start off with that. I don't know who this is to, but what was the platform you're using for your community meetings?
Yeah, so for our community meetings, we also use Zoom and we use Google Hangouts sometimes, but I think maybe what Jan might have been referring to was the screenshot that I had. So that's where we send all of our, that's where we send all of our messages to each other, and we use Slack. So Slack is a really great, it's a really great tool. Yeah, you know what it is, fantastic. We use it all the time. So yeah, it's fantastic for finding new people.
Okay, thanks for that. Next question, do the citizens take part in civic tech? How do you form the teams?
Great question. Yeah, so the citizens take part in lots of different ways. So say, for example, when we were building the Legal Aid New South Wales website that I showed you in the presentation, we contacted a bunch of people citizens who had utilized those services. So we asked them what they wanted out of the service. We would show them prototypes of ideas that we had. And if they didn't like it, they would tell us why not. So a lot of it is for user testing in terms of things like the fellowship. But also we do a lot of community outreach with people to find out what they're interested in and what types of projects we can help with. I think there was another part. Oh yeah, how do the teams form? We basically put out a call to see who wants to help us out. So we do that via our Slack channel, and we do it on Seek and places like that. That's for our formalized fellowships. So that's how we were lucky enough to find Nish.
Okay, thanks for that. The next one is, one of the problems we all experience with tech from phones, emails and social media is the intrusion of scammers, spammers and other fraudsters. Are you doing anything to protect us tech users from these nasty people?
Yeah, fantastic question. We ran a project at Code for Australia 2 or 3 years ago with, I can't remember what the government department was now, but it was essentially trying to protect people's privacy. So yes, we do projects like this. It's just about whether or not the government agencies that sort of handle this kind of stuff want us to be involved in potential work that they're doing. There's a lot of work going on in New South Wales at the moment specifically, but unfortunately in Victoria, the government's not doing too much.
Someone said, Peter, I have a question. He's a verbal. So Peter, turn your mic on, whoever Peter is, it's not me, and ask your question.
It was actually me, Peter. David. Sorry, David.
Sorry.
But I've been called Pete. I've been called much worse things.
Peter,
actually.
I have a question. Sorry,
Peter.
I thought it was Peter has a question. Okay.
That's okay. I've got a couple of questions for Esther. Thank you both for those presentations. I have to say, comment, Nish, that in my business, a lot of my business before I retired was helping customers to find solutions to their needs. And one of the things I had to do a lot is get them to learn the difference between their needs and their wants. So actually drilling down and finding out what is actually needed, what's going to do the job, in my context, was totally different to yours. That's the important part of the whole thing. And now the other comment is, so many people, and I still see it, I have to admit I see it in this club, is so many people jump straight to the solution before they've even asked the question.
Yeah.
And that's a very common kind of human frailty, I suppose you might say. Now, a couple of specific comments and questions, Esther. I've had experience of a number of government websites and things like this, and I think I'm in context here. Some of them are good and some of them are just indescribably awful. Do you have a process for studying the methodologies of the successful government websites and somehow rolling that into your I don't want to use that word learnings, but your information and how you operate?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really great question too. So we actually partnered with the Harvard Business School in 2018, and we came up with something that's called a digital maturity indicator. So basically what that is we go into a government team or a department and we figure out what their digital maturity is based on what is essentially a baseline that we came up with in collaboration with Harvard Business School. So that's something that we could do for a team to check their digital maturity at large. But if there's something that's specific, like say those specific websites that you've gone to, we're lucky that we've got some really great technical minds that know what's good and know what isn't, know what's best practice, and are pretty quick to be able to dissect why things work and why they don't. The best way I always explain it to people who aren't technical, I'm not particularly technical, but to people who are even, who don't know what that kind of stuff is, when you go on a website and you can't figure out where you need to go, that means it's not working properly.
Yep, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so that's we're lucky that we have that best practice, that we have a lot of people who understand that, but also we do have that digital maturity indicator program, which we're very proud of.
Oh, interesting. So, yeah, just a couple of the things. I was in business for many, many years, and we exported things overseas. Now, at one stage, the packages we were sending were big enough to have to get a kind of a nod from the, I think, customs department, mainly just so they could collect statistics on what was being exported. Yeah. So back in the good old days, all you had to do is write out a fax, fill in a form, fax it to them, and an export number would come back about an hour later. Then they decided to computerize it.
Yeah.
It cost us a small fortune to learn how to use this system, to comply with all the stuff. It was just a total and utter nightmare. And I can't quite remember the outcome. I think in the end we just said, bugger this, we'll just send it out anyhow. It was just totally self-defeating. And that, what was it, My Health Record or something like that?
My Health Record.
We actually, you'll enjoy this, Esther, we actually had some guest speakers in the club a year or two ago from a local organization that was a sort of subcontractor to My Health Record. And it was very clear that the principal, one of those two people that turned up, didn't believe in it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was just, and in fact, my daughter-in-law works in that organisation as well in Dandenong. I'm not sure what she felt. I think she was pretty cynical about the whole thing. And that one totally failed because it didn't gather all the important information anyhow. You know,
No,
chemists were excluded and physiotherapists were included, and it was just a total schmoz.
It was a mess. And I think, speaking a little bit to what Nish was talking about in her presentation about making sure that you've got all the basics covered before you start exploring everything else.
Yeah.
They didn't use human-centered design. They
Yep.
didn't ask people what they wanted. They didn't, they weren't iterative about it either. Like when they knew it was failing, they kind of just kept at it, which is very productive.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's probably one of the best examples we can think of, really.
Yeah, it wasn't really a feast. It was more a drive-through packet box of chips at McDonald's, and soggy ones at that, I think.
Yeah, not very good ones.
Very terrible. There are some good ones. I've done a couple of trademark registrations online with the Australian government, and it's brilliant. You just go in, you start doing the thing, you need to go off and have lunch, you just put it aside, park it, come back later, come back a week later, and it's all there.
That's fantastic.
And that really works. There are a few that work. I'm probably going to shortly find out about the...
You're paying for them, they should work.
Well, yeah, and we're talking, I don't know how they could spend hundreds of millions of dollars on these things.
Yeah, well,
total fit. I've worked in a little company where $1 million was a unthinkable amount of money, and they spend hundreds of those. So yeah, someone called Richard just wrote, contractors make a lot more money from bad systems than good ones, and that's entirely true. Oh, but
yes. If they build something that might be good, they build something that's finite, so then they have to come back 12 months later and charge you a lot more money. And they do it to the government too.
Yeah, is that willful or is it Kruger-Dunning effect?
Well, I've got my opinions.
Okay, thanks.
Another question, how have the reactions been to your organisation ideas from the various levels of government?
Good one.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we predominantly work with state government, and that's for a few reasons. Partly it's money. So they are a lot more willing to give us money, and because we're a not-for-profit, we need it. They have a lot more teams. Local council doesn't always have the money to, the way that their budget cycles work just don't really add up with some of our key programs, but we do work a little bit with councils. And we're very well received. We're very well loved. People like us because we're cheaper than people that try and gouge money from them. But the overarching thing that they always come away with really is the fact that we've taught them something. We haven't just come in and given them a product or given them a service. Part of the service that we're offering to them is to be able to show them how to maintain things by themselves, because knowledge is power. And we try and really make sure that we're leaving them with the right information.
This one here is interesting. Do you only work on commission, or do you approach agencies with proposals? I hope your answer is that you will approach agencies with proposals, because I'd like you to contact the ATO and ask them to get their MyGov website looking good, because I spend half my time on the phone asking them how the MyGov website works.
Funny you should say. We actually just had a meeting with someone who just started working at MyGov today. So funny you should say that. I would love to work with the ATO. That would be fantastic. Unfortunately, things in government move very slowly in terms of everything, as I'm sure everyone can probably attest to, but they specifically move very slowly in terms of procurement. So that means that our normal sales cycle, so, us pitching to someone and them getting back to us, can be between 18 and 24 months. So it takes a really long time for them to approve anything, which means we're constantly knocking on doors. But we would love to get it to the point where they're knocking on our doors consistently. But we have a lot of ideas for them. So we're constantly coming at them.
Thanks for that. How large is your group, and in what role, e.g. tech versus designers versus analysts versus evaluators?
Yeah, great question as well. So we're a really small organisation. Our full-time permanent staff, there's 3 of us. So a third of us are here. And then we've also got, we're really small. So we do big things. That's part of what we try and teach people, is you don't need a lot of money. You don't need that many people to actually build cool things that matter. So we kind of practice what we preach by keeping our organisation lean. In terms of our contractors though, so people like Nish who are undertaking a fellowship, we can have anywhere from 10, or really we can have anywhere from 3 to 20 at a time, depending on how many programs we have running. And the makeup of those teams is really dependent on what the problem we're trying to solve is. So as Nish was saying, sometimes, you know, you need pots and you need pans. Sometimes you might need lots of pots and sometimes you don't need that many. So the project that Nish is working on is 3 developers, but some other projects have been a data scientist with a UX, a user experience person, and a developer. So it's really varied. We're a mixed group, and that's what Civic Tech is about, because it's not just about the tech, it's also about the civic. So I personally don't know how to code. I'm not interested in learning how to code. It's scary to me at that language. People like Nish are great at that. So yeah, we want to make sure that everyone's involved, and that means people that aren't very technical too.
Someone's made the comment here about the health system where it just moved. The problem with the health record is that GPs and the path labs do not update it, and I think that's right. I don't know what experience you've had with that My Health Record, but I had some procedure recently and the doctor written on it, don't put it on the health record. So I can see why it doesn't work.
Yeah, doctors didn't love it.
The next one is a USA study showed that in 2018, the cost of bad software was 3 trillion, about 15% of the US GDP.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I mean, you saw we've got 1 billion just with My Health Record. So there's lots of examples of this costing a lot of money. And sometimes it's not in these huge sums either. Sometimes it's just, you know, well, not just, it's a lot of money, but sometimes it's $400,000 here, $200,000 there. That number does not surprise me at all. It's a huge cost to taxpayers.
I'm not sure where the COVID app is. With all this tracing, I haven't heard it mentioned in 6 months. So I don't know whether that's working for them. They've gone quiet.
Yeah, it costs a lot of money.
Oh, well, someone's made that comment there. Useless COVID-19 tracing, that was another waste of $70 million when advertising was counted. Do you have anyone who is an expert in COBOL? COBOL?
Do you know what that is, Nish?
What's that, she says?
Yeah, that's a language.
Oh, it's
but
a language.
As far as I have read through the bios of everyone, I haven't seen anyone mentioning COBOL. I think Daniel might have some knowledge on it.
Oh, okay, so some of our fellows, some of the people that work with us on a temporary, but yeah, I'm not sure. Actually, and also our managing director would know. He's the very technical person on our core team. He speaks every language.
A simple question is, do you ever run out of sticky notes?
Not if we can help it.
I won't, someone said I won't claim to be an expert, but I earned a living at a COBOL program from 64 to 205 or thereabouts.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yes.
Early days.
Oh, okay. Oh my God, someone says, COBOL, how many millions of lines of code are still in production? They're talking above my head here, I'm afraid.
There's a lot. There is still a lot, I bet.
Millions.
Yeah.
There is an economic incentive for contract companies to prefer badly designed systems. I don't know how true that is, and that is. Do you use volunteers?
Yeah, so we've got, we wouldn't use volunteers for the work that we do directly with government, but we have the program that we run called Civic Makers, where we invite volunteers in to basically come up with ideas that they want to solve. And we will connect them with the right people, and we facilitate their projects kind of being run in the way that we run them. So we're actually working on a project at the moment that's all volunteer run, which is looking at the voting records of MPs throughout Australia. And we're going to be building a website that shows you kind of in a visual way, the way that they vote on different themes of policy.
Oh, that will be interesting. They're happy to have that, are they?
They won't be, probably not. Well, you know, if they're happy with how they voted, they'll be fine.
Someone says that COBOL is common business oriented language. You're learning something every day.
I'm learning.
Another question, are you working at all with Australian Computer Society or at entry level with tech schools teaching STEM/STEAM?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we do work with some tech schools. We've worked with Girls Who Code before, but not predominantly with like we work with Girls Who Code. We've worked with Coder Academy. We've worked with Academy XI as well. So we have worked with a lot of them doing like in-kind things. And we also just started working with an organisation called Generation Australia, who offer these kinds of courses as well. But I don't think we've done any work with Australian Computer Society. So that would be a good one for us to research for sure.
Okay. You started off by saying your aim is working towards a government made by and for everyone. That sounds like a slightly political statement to me. Is it meant to be, or is it just an aim that you'd like to achieve?
Yeah, I mean, I hope we're being apolitical. It tends to be that certain parties obviously give a little bit more money to technology in general. But no, it's not supposed to be political. We just want to make sure that everyone's voice is represented and that the things that are being built with our money, it is our money, we pay taxes, are for us and are for a representative of everyone who lives in Australia, which doesn't always happen. So yeah, it's for everyone.
Yeah. Another statement you had up, political change through technology. Can you expand on that a bit?
Yeah, so I guess political change through technology for us means, oh God, it means a lot of things, but I think a lot of it is just making sure that people have access to knowledge and to the services that they need. Like the example that you gave, MyGov, is a great one. MyGov it's painful to use. It never works. Means that you have to call, which means that you're on hold. Like, we just want to make sure that these kinds of changes are being implemented in a way that makes sense. And the best way to do that is to ask people what they need and what they aren't getting. And unfortunately, sometimes the government doesn't do that.
I think Donald Trump would be interested in that. He's a bit worried about technology with the upcoming election, isn't he? You haven't offered your services to the Republican Party on how to vote?
You know, we haven't, but maybe Code for America have, because they've got their own thing going on. But I very much doubt it. They're very much about getting people to vote, not stopping people from voting. So I don't know.
Another question: what database products do you use?
In database products for, maybe that's a question for Nish for your project.
Yeah, I'll take that on. It mostly depends on how the organization wants it. So right now we are working with Form.io, which controls its own database at backend. Some of the projects have used MongoDB and some used SQL. So it totally depends on the organization, totally depends on the government, what they actually want and what's in parallel with their old systems. So it's not just like one answer to it. It can vary.
It depends on the team that we're working with, because we work with so many different teams throughout government and they don't have, it's not a uniform system. So, which sometimes can make things difficult. So it depends on the team.
Okay. This is probably more a comment. Lots of the still operating insurance company systems are written in COBOL. So there's
there you go.
Something there. How has COVID affected you operating?
I think we've done it really well. We not to pat us on the back, but we found out about COVID. We closed our laptops. We all went home, and half an hour later, we were all working again. We already had a high digital fluency because that's what we get paid to do. But it's affected the way that we communicate with people. I think that I've heard a few of you say already tonight that, you know, by the end of lockdown, everyone's going to be experts in everything to do with their computers. And that's great. You know, I feel like everyone's progressed a lot in a short period of time because of what's been going on. We've also decided that we might be fully remote. We're not sure. So it's also going to give us access to more remote areas in Australia because people are now happy for people to work from home. So that's going to open up what we can do a lot.
this is slightly political too, I think. Would you like the people to digitally vote on policies directly, avoiding government?
Would I don't know if I can answer that question.
Which is a bit, it's possible in this day and age, of course, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a couple of countries in Eastern Europe that have started doing things like this. We are not obviously there, so that's what I can say.
Someone's looking for a job. How do software developers apply to work with you?
Great question. Well, maybe Nish, you can answer this one because you are a software developer.
Yeah, so what I did was I visited the website, and from there I joined the Slack channel. If you'll go on the website, you see join us, and then you'll have the link to the Slack channel, and there you'll have some channels where there is something called jobs. So there will on time there you'll see jobs posting up there. Or if you'll go onto the page, if you look at careers, then you'll have the list of jobs openings there as fellowship, which is developer too. So
we post all of our jobs on the website as well. So when we get a contract from government, we make sure that it goes straight up onto the website when we're recruiting for people. And I'm happy to share those links with everyone later, or I can get Kirsten or whoever is appropriate to send them through, maybe in a newsletter.
And follow the Code for Australia LinkedIn page. You'll find the jobs there too.
Someone said, would your slides be available for download?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a public link, so I'll share that as well with everyone.
Okay, Kirsten, if you're there, are you happy for them to send it to you, Kirsten, and you can upload it? I'm not sure whether she's there, but
she said, of course, in the chat.
You said you work for governments, etc., etc. Are you available for a not-for-profit organisation like MelbPC to assist us with our website if need be?
Yeah, I guess it would depend on the scope and it would depend on what you were looking to do. But the best thing to do is always just to tell us what you need and we can let you know if we can do it.
Okay, so it's up to the president and the committee, to follow through on that. If I'm not sure whether what they're at with their thing. Is there a market for testers for your work?
We tend to be really, really specific. So, for example, with the Hobsons Bay City Council app, which was the recycling one I showed, we contacted residents through the council. That tends to be the way that we go about things, but different agencies, different digital agencies do go through what are basically recruiters. We don't tend to do that because, like we said, we want the things that we're building to be for the people that they're for. So we tend to go pretty directly through networks that kind of already exist for the government department.
Do you ever do no-code solutions? I'm not sure what that is.
Yeah, well, if by no-code solutions, you mean where we don't, what does that mean? Does that mean that we don't build it?
That's the question.
Kind of online forms.
Do you ever do no-code solutions? Kind of online forms?
I think it's referring more towards where you don't have to code and it's just like drag and drop thing, if I'm not wrong.
That's right. There's kind of online spreadsheets and things like that. Yeah.
Oh, we haven't really. We've done simple forms before for the government. Like we did one where people could report harassment and things like that, but they're all coded because of the systems that the government use. So we haven't, but maybe we will one day.
Because none of us should want to be in a world of even higher spending, even higher taxes, ever more debt, and continuing state border closures, however necessary they might have been in the short term at the height of this pandemic. The key feature.
Sorry, I just muted.
We're all muted.
All. If Esther could unmute and continue on.
Nish, maybe you'll have to unmute if you. Okay, there's just a. Okay. you said you're designing a code of rubbish bins in one of the councils. Having developed a good system for that council, do you then try to sell it to all the other councils? And if you do, are they receptive?
Great question. So we actually just had a presentation we did a presentation with the Municipal Association of Victoria. So it's basically all the councils. And to talk about this, but there's a lot of issues with collaboration between councils just generally, not even just in terms of digital things. They tend to be slightly competitive with each other. So we would absolutely love it if they could redo it, redo what we've already built for themselves. Like our code is open, so they can take it if they want to. They don't have to give us any money. But yeah, there's a lot of examples in recent history where laws have changed or regulations have changed, and apps all throughout the state have built their own versions of things instead of consulting with each other. So there's obviously a lot of drawbacks to that, money being one of them, but also people might be able to share more and learn more and, you know, share some of the load of the work.
So a follow-on question for the no code, do you do project management to improve business processes?
Yeah, so we try and do that through the different programs that we do, basically. So Nish talked a little bit about, and I also spoke slightly about our agile process. So that's kind of our project management. That's how we project manage. So I think I mentioned a little bit about how we work in 2-week bursts, and we do these things called retrospectives, where we take a look back and see what hasn't worked. And we have all of our work kind of in one place. So that's kind of how we project manage within the teams that we go into in government. And I would say 8 times out of 10, they keep using it because it's a really good way to plan things. It's not a good way to say, build a house. You don't want to be too iterative when you're building a house. But with things to do with tech, you want to make sure that you're, you know, staying on top of changes and things like that.
Maybe to Nish, you had an example of cooking there, the example you used. When you've completed it all, you obviously road test it. I think you said you'd get volunteers in and have a lavish meal. Having done all that and you iron out a few of the glitches, do the customers accept? Do you have any trouble with the customers accepting what you've presented for them?
Yeah, obviously, so that was just an overview. So in between, what we do is go for more of user testing so that you have people with some particular persona who is actually a target audience, and you give them for testing, and you don't tell a single thing about the application, what the application does. So as already Esther said, how it looks as a best product is when you give the application to the user and you just have to click things and you'll learn it by yourself that how this application works. So and in any case, if you give a flawed application to the user, it is not going to make any sense. It's not going to add value to the end product. So in most of the times and high percentages, the end user won't accept that product. So it has to go through the iteration of user testing to get a perfect product at the end. Perfect, I would say 90% matching product at the end.
In my previous life, I was involved with drawing up a program, and it was done with Queensland University, and we road tested just within the company before we turned it loose on the rest of the employees, which is a similar thing. Sort of thing. How do you decide what technologies to use?
So it mostly, sometimes there are stacks which are already decided by the government. So you have to go through it by doing the pros and cons. And if it's not, then we usually go through what are the past experiences with the project, what's the percentage of success rate, what's the maintenance cost of it if for long term, and what is security aspects associated with that. So yeah, majorly these points. So cost to maintain that, And what does the employment turnover, like if the employment turnover is high, do you have already existing skills in the market or not? So for example, there are 10 people who have left a job who has that skill, and you are going to look out for the people who with the similar skills. So do you have that people with the skills in the market or not? So that is also very important.
That leads me to a question is, Esther mentioned about working with the council with all their rubbish bins. The council next door decide that they'd like the same thing, but they're an Apple council. The one Esther dealt with was a Microsoft council. Is it possible to merge the two or adapt the same system for the two different
I think
softwares?
it's possible to do with different softwares for sure, but it's better to measure what's the positives and the negatives of both of the things. So if the second council wants something which inclines more towards heavy maintenance, low security, and the other council has low maintenance and high security, so it's valuable to present these things to them. So, but yeah, you can make one application with 10 different languages.
A simple question. Did the Victorian government consult you on hotel quarantining?
No. Did they consult you?
No. Here we go. In systems I have been involved in, we got the user to design the user interface while we implemented it. Users are very defensive of their own ideas. They are generally defensive of their own, they've repeated it, they are generally very defensive of their own ideas. Do you find that?
Yes, I suppose. I mean, if they've designed their interface, what we tend to do though as well is, like, if we're testing something, we might test something on the people that it's for, and then we'll make a bunch of changes based off that, and then we might test it on a group of new people that haven't seen it before, because then what that means is that they're coming at it from fresh eyes. And like Nish was saying, if what you've built works and it looks good and it, you know, feels good to use, then anyone should be able to use it. So we tend to make sure that it's with fresh eyes.
Okay. I don't think there's any more questions there. I've run out of questions. If anyone's got a question, they can just, you've got a couple of minutes to type your question in, and I'm sure the girls will be able to answer it for you.
Great questions.
No one's typing. So I'm not sure what time we're meant to finish, but...
about now, Peter.
Okay. Well,
so you're right on time.
They've done a great job in speaking slowly enough to occupy all the time with the questions that have been answered. Thanks very much, girls.
We
Over
really
to you,
appreciate
Stuart.
it. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your night.
Thank you,
Thank
Esther.
you.
Thank you, Nish.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Right. It looks like it's about time for a break. So until, let's have about a 6-minute break, about 15:15, if I've got my arithmetic right. So we'll come back at about 8:15, 8:16, something like that. Okay. What's next? Must be David Stonier Gibson that's up next.
I think so, yes.
So over to you, David.
Thank you, Stuart. Can you hear me? Good. Yes?
Yes.
Well, let me adjust that camera. It's not very good, is it? There, that's better, I think. Okay, that was a pretty interesting presentation by those two young ladies, I thought. I think somebody needs to sort out these government websites, that's for sure. Okay, well, the first thing you'll notice is we are on Zoom. The decision to switch to Zoom was made a bit fairly late in the piece, unfortunately. It was sort of late Monday or sometime yesterday. I think we finalized it yesterday. It became necessary because the terms and conditions for the Google Meet that we were using got changed on the 1st of October. We got caught a little bit with our pants down, I think, and they were going to limit us to 100 attendees. And this time, at the moment, we've got 110 people present at in the meeting, so we would have had to reject a few people. So we very hurriedly took out a license for Zoom for up to 250 people, I think it is, which cost us for $450 or something for a year. So now we should be comfortable in Zoom for at least the next year. My guess is that even after the COVID thing is over, we're going to be doing an awful lot of online stuff. So it'll be a well worth investment, I think. Okay, next thing, I sent out a notice a little while ago to advise everyone that we're deferring the AGM. This is something we found ourselves in a position where we couldn't find a satisfactory solution to online voting and everything that everyone on the committee felt would comply with the regulations. So we decided to take advantage of the same regulations and defer the meeting until February. So as of the normal date for the AGM, which is the first Wednesday of November, officially the committee will become a caretaker committee, which means we can't do anything drastic like sell Moorabbin or grant ourselves salaries or anything like that. Otherwise, it'll be pretty much steady as we've been going. We will continue working on the club rooms to the extent we can in terms of being allowed in. And hopefully when we do come out of COVID, we'll have some transformations in place. Now, I'll talk about transformations. The museum is one of the things that we're working on, and I'm very happy to tell you that we have a young man in the club, Aidan Kelly, who is a designer, a design draftsman in the shop fitting type area. And Aidan has agreed that he will help us to design some, use the word furniture for want of a better word, some furniture that our volunteers can build to make the museum, as we build it up, as interesting as possible, rather than just a bunch of things stuck down on tables with placards on them. So that's fairly exciting. I think the opportunities there could be good. And finally, the transition to G Suite. Just to make it even more interesting, Google are now renaming G Suite, and henceforth it will be known as Google Workspace. But that's how it is with these companies. They love changing names. Now, let me just say this. I sent out a notice, although notice went, no, I didn't send out, I'm sorry. The notice was sent out twice in the last 24 hours, and it was put on, did put it on Yammer to say that this meeting was being moved from Google Meet to Zoom. I've been monitoring the old Google Meet, and 6 people fronted up there, and only to find a sign redirecting us to Zoom, redirecting them to Zoom. But it's really important to read your notices. Please, when you get notices from the club in your email, do read them. Particularly at the moment, because there's a lot of stuff going on that's not normal because of COVID and the transition to Google Workspace. And what has happened to a few people who've received emails about the transition addressed to their name plus migration at melbpc.org, a notice saying that their email was being redirected. Some people have undone that redirection, I believe, or just deleted the email. Those notices are important, and it's important to understand what they mean. Now, the transition is faced with one fairly major problem, and that's this, that there are not a lot of people are needing more support than I think had been anticipated. And for that reason, it's going more slowly than it should be. So if anyone has the ability to assist, you don't have to be a computer guru. If anyone has got the ability, even if it's just to assist a couple of members in addition to yourself to get the transition done, that would be fantastic. And I think the best thing probably would be if you've had a transition, you let the support team through Harry Lewis know that you've been transitioned. And this is about email, not about some other form of transition, by the way, that you've been transitioned and what your configuration is. So if you're using XYZ email client in conjunction with POP3, let that be known. There'll probably be other members who've got exactly the same configuration or something close. Maybe you can give them a little bit of assistance and solace and take the load off the far too few support volunteers that we have at the moment. I think that just winds it up for me. Nothing much more to say at the moment. So thank you for your attention. It's goodbye from him and goodbye from me. Goodbye.
Okay. Does anybody have questions for David? He probably doesn't want questions, but you know, the chat's there for you to use for that purpose. In the absence of any questions,
actually, I'm going to butt in here. Richard Bradford. Sorry about that, Stu, but Richard Bradford
that's all right.
type in a question. Why not try practice voting with Zoom? The problem is it's not legally allowed. We have to follow strict rules, or we could get into trouble with the government. One of our members is actually works for the Australian Electoral Commission, and he would probably come down on that like a ton of bricks as well. So our hands are tied. This is sort of one of those situations where we've got to really have to comply with the rules. I'm not really a rule stickler myself, but some places, some circumstances, we really have to. So thanks for the idea, Richard, but that's a no thanks. And somebody said we can have 500 people on Zoom, which is fine. I'd love it to get 500 people.
John Thompson has a question.
Yes, I'm just wondering if you can give us some idea of the basis for how you're converting people on the email system. Is it done alphabetically by Christian name or email address or membership number or what?
John, I'm not going to answer that question because I'm just the stable genius at the top of this pile. I don't involve myself with the technical side. And I don't think, I don't know if anyone's here in the meeting who would like to field that question. I think it's done more in terms of the nature of their usage more than anything. It's sort of trying to, it's not alphabetical. But that's the best answer I can give you, I'm afraid.
Okay, thanks. I was just wondering if there was anything that would give us a guide to how long it would be before we get converted.
Yeah, I can't answer that question.
Okay.
And
John Swale's got a question.
You're muted, John.
John Swale,
yep.
You're muted.
Well, I've got the space bar down. It was being done by people who had some expertise and were known to the group, and then it's been transitioned out to bigger lots. The other thing with the AGM is that everybody has to have the same access to voting and everything else as if they were in the meeting. And we cannot guarantee that the person who is voting is a current financial member. So there's a whole lot of things in there, and we're hoping that by February we'll be able to set up something that works. Otherwise, we're going to have to spend a lot of money.
On a very secure system. Yep. Thank you,
Okay.
John. Thanks, John.
You've got 1 minute. No? Then we'll move on. George Scarbeck is up next with What's New.
Okay.
Yes.
Hi, folks. I have just unmuted myself. And something about what's new. Particularly, I mean, there's so much new. What do you touch? Similarly, with battery technology, there are announcements at least weekly about improving the batteries from the anode or the cathode, which is often where they start. The materials they use, the mixture, granularity, etc., etc. They come from universities and industry, saying you'll have cars with 1,500 kilometre range soon. You know, you can do this and that. However, they don't give a time frame. So eventually, we will see an improvement in batteries, a significant one, perhaps. Now, I'm keen on photography, and so I know quite a few other people are. Well, everybody would like to have more megapixels up to a point. Well, the world's first 3,200 megapixel photo sensor has been made for the world's largest digital camera. The array will be over 60 centimeters wide with extreme specifications. It'll be used for astronomy because it's not all that portable. The lens itself weighs about 3.5 tons. And it's got to be encased in a cryostat at minus 101 degrees centigrade. So that'll be the size of many, many big fridges. You can see the point about not being very portable. But the focal plane was big enough to capture the sky equivalent to 40 full moons lined up side to side. And thanks to the optics, you'll be able to spot objects that are 100 million times dimmer than you can see with the naked eye. That's equivalent to seeing a candle from many thousand kilometers away. And the resolution, everybody wants a good resolution. You'll be able to spot a golf ball 25 kilometers away. That's impressive. Probably in a few years' time, your phone will be able to do that, but at the moment, it's quite impressive. Now, for those of you who would like to brighten up your home theatre with a new K projector, Sony is just the thing for you. They've got 3 models of 4K cinema projectors. The top of the line boasting 10,000 lumens, currently about 3 times what you expect from the flagship models. The second highest model comes in at $20,000 US and features a laser source. It also boasts infinite dynamic contrast. Without going into the details, it'll give you deeper blacks than ever, as well as bright, vibrant colors. I mean, that's 20,000 US, you'd expect to be pretty good. However, the top of the line includes a new laser source that adds a red diode and onto 2 different wavelengths of blue diode on the improved 4K panel. And this results in the brightness that will allow movie showing even in well-lit rooms, together with 100% support for the latest color gambit. It'll be fantastic colors and show all fantastic colors in the real world. However, the price hasn't been announced. And as you all know, if you have to ask how much, you can't afford it. Now, a barcode. We mentioned barcodes briefly, but this is a different one. This covers 66 million years in the change of climate being recovered from the ocean sediments. It's been going for about half a century by very many countries. 12 international labs have been lifting material from the ocean floor for decades. And they got evidence from the oxygen and carbon isotopes, provides information about the past deep sea temperatures, ice and volumes of the carbon cycle. These clues are stored in the shells of microorganisms that lived once on the sea floor. Now, I'd like to share my screen, if you bear with me. So you can see the barcode. I've seen samples of it and I didn't realize what it meant. So if you, second now, I've lost it on mine. Bear with me, folks. It's interesting. Oh, you can see the cursor now. There are, on the x-axis, there are 3 discontinuities. This is in millions of years, so starting from about 66 million of years. This is thousands of years prior, and this is the change to 1950, where it goes in just a bit more than decades, I think, 50-year increments. And some of the projections, as you see, huge projections. They haven't come to a conclusion which way we're going to go, but let's all hope it's not going to go near vertically with the temperature. That's going to be really bad news. And oh, there's some more details. And then finally, surprise, surprise, vinyl sales surpassed CDs for the first time. It's probably because of a huge fall in CD sales last year, falling 50% in the first half. I think all of us has got, or many of us will have lots of vinyl records. I still have a big shelf of vinyl records. But it's interesting, CDs, which probably won't surprise anybody, are diminishing because you've got so many streaming services, in fact, free streaming services. They're diminishing very, very quickly. Now, I hope I stopped sharing. No, I haven't. How much time do I have? A couple of minutes?
You have another 4 minutes.
Okay. I've been doing this for quite a few years, since June. And that was page 174 or 76 you're looking at. Started middle of June and what was happening. Some things are still valid. The Mongolian post office introduced what's 3 words. Instead of having a GPS, you can give 3 words and they will find the nomads in the yak when you move them there. Tectonic plates, all relevant. And Samsung unveiled a 4 terabyte EVO consumer SSD. They said they will be available in 2015, a few months ago. The price is now in the hundreds of dollars, not in the tens of thousands. Electric cars made headline news, equivalent to 250,000 miles per gallon. Of course, it's not a normal car, but Epsom had a 4K projector in 2016. And some of the things, the evolution, that continued, VCR stopped, but many of the things in here we just take for granted. And some of the things didn't eventuate, so I stopped saying what's new when people are announcing something really fantastic. I want to wait until it actually appeared. I was interested in autonomous cars who were appearing then, there still are. And you can see it, what's new. Some things just been forgotten. Qualcomm is getting better and better. The server was interesting. And I've checked on the more recent one, and some of the bad cars are still bad. And basically, that's about what's new. In this case, it was what's old. So over to you, Stuart.
We've come to the official end of the evening. And if anybody out there, any members out there still have problems that they'd like to discuss with the iHelp team, then the iHelp team have volunteered, as usual, to stay around for a little bit longer and field your questions. Otherwise, I shall say good night on behalf of all members, and remind you that on November, I think the 4th, have I got it right?
Could be.
Could be. Okay. It could be November the 4th, the first Wednesday, of course, in the month.
Yeah, 3 days, yes.
Yeah, it is Wednesday,
when
4th.
Normally we would have our annual general meeting, but that's been deferred until February. So you won't be bored by an annual general meeting. We'll just have to rely on our wonderful Kirsten Greed to come up with some interesting speakers and do it all again. So thank you and good night from me.